Hi there, Mini Cooper owners. Today in your 2016 Mini Cooper S, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Roadmaster's Direct Connect baseplate kit. And this is what our baseplate looks like when it's installed. Your baseplate is one of 5 main components you'll need when flat towing your vehicle behind your motorhome. In addition to your baseplate, you'll also need your tow bar, which is the connection point between your motorhome and your vehicle, your safety cables, which is a supplemental connection in addition to your tow bar, your diode wiring, which takes all the lighting signals from your motorhome, transfers them to the lights at the back of your vehicle so people around you know your intentions going down the road, and your supplemental braking system, which will apply the brakes in your vehicle when you hit the brakes in your motorhome. Now, we just saw it with the arms installed, and this is where our tow bar is going to connect to. Your tow bar will come with the pins that will slide through and get it all attached. The arms are removable though, so if you're not flat towing your vehicle, simply pull the pin, give it a twist, and it slides out, and now we've got a nice clean look. And now you can see what it looks like when your arms are removed when you're driving your vehicle around town. In addition to the locations where your tow bar will connect when you slide your arms in, we have a safety chain loop connection on each side of the vehicle. And this is where we'll attach our safety chains in addition to our tow bar. And for your wiring, Roadmaster has provided a small bracket that shoots down and pokes through your fascia so you can get it easily attached. And I really like the outcome here. After just installing it, you can see we've got a really clean look here in the front. A lot of times you have to cut out large sections of your fascia in order to get your wiring installed, but on this one it poked right through. We only had to make a very small cut just for our connector to pass through. By adding this base plate to your Mini, you're going to be able to connect it to your motorhome so you can flat tow it behind you. And what I really like about this base plate is how good it looks when it's installed. It really looks pretty much factory. I mean, besides the little tab sticking out for your safety cables to connect to, you almost don't even notice it's there. And since our Mini here has black on the trim around it, it kind of just blends right in. Now, our arms are pretty noticeable when they're installed, but really the only time you're ever going to have them in is when you're flat towing. So no big deal. And one of the things I like about this versus a tow dolly is that you don't have anything you have to store when you're going to be flat towing it. If you bring it to the campsite on a tow dolly, once you get there, you take your vehicle off, well, now you got a tow dolly, a little trailer behind your motorhome that you have to somehow get out of the way. It's just taking up real estate on your campsite. And then vice versa, when you take your vehicle home, well, now you got a tow dolly at home that you either need to store in your garage, you could leave it outside, but then it's in the harsh weather. But with this, everything's on your vehicle, and you just make the connections and go. You don't really have to think about it. You don't have to line anything up. It's just hooking it up to your motorhome and taking off. Base plates are usually a little more challenging of an installation to do, but on our Mini here, it really wasn't as bad as I would expect it to be. The fascia comes off fairly easy for as tight as everything is in the vehicle, and the base plate installs pretty easily. There's not a lot of drilling required. There is a couple of minimal drilling required across our bumper beam here in the center, but it goes on pretty quick. Compared to a lot of other vehicles out there, this is going to be one of the mediocre base plates to install. And now that we've gone over some of the features, let's go over the installation together so you can have the confidence to do it at home. We'll begin our installation underneath the hood by removing 3 bolts here at the front that attach our fascia to our core support. We use a T30 Torx socket to remove those. We're now on the fender liner on the inside toward the front of the vehicle, right in front of the tire. You got your reflector right here, kind of where they meet. You'll see a bolt. We're going to remove that using an 8mm socket. Now I'm going to use a swivel to take it out. If you don't have a swivel like this, you could turn your wheel towards the inside to give you some clearance to get in there. We'll then remove the other side's bolt in the same location. We're going to remove the 7 bolts located across the bottom. We'll use an 8mm socket to do so. We'll now need to partially remove our trim piece here to access a bolt located behind it. It is pinned in pretty good. The only bolt that we had that held it in we already had removed. Now if you pull out slightly here on the bottom, Just gently pull it out. You'll see that there's a small gap that'll appear. It's probably really hard to see there on the camera due to it being black, but take a flat-bladed screwdriver, push it into the little slot, and then just kind of pry downward to pull that tab out. If you keep a little bit of pressure on the top piece, it should separate as you're doing this. We can then work our way up. And there is going to be some pins located up in there. They are also very difficult to see, but if you look behind it, you'll be able to barely see the pins, and you can use your trim panel tool to remove those pins. So hook your trim panel tool on the pin, and then pry it outward. Keep on moving. There may be another pin along the way that you'll need to pop out. Just do it the same way. Here's the little pin that we popped out there. Keep an eye out for pins, popping them out as you go. Really, we don't need to take it all the way off either. This here is probably pretty good. We're going to disconnect our electrical connector here by pressing it on the release tabs and pulling it out. And these are the bolts we were trying to access right here, this Torx bolt. We'll remove that now with the T30 Torx socket. We'll then do the same thing on the other side. You can see here this is the pins we were removing to pop these out. Normally they stay in your panel, but if they come out, it's not a big deal. The little slot that it goes in right here, it just slides right back in that, and it clips back in. We can now start removing our fascia. You'll want to grab it in the middle to support it, and then start on one side, just work your way off. You'll check for any electrical connectors located behind it as you're doing so. Work yourself back and forth, releasing it as you go. If you have fog lights equipped in your vehicle, you want to make sure you disconnect the electrical connectors. Some of them may be easier to just remove the bulb rather than disconnect the connector. We'll then do that to the other side as well. With all your electrical connectors disconnected, we can pull it away and set it aside where it won't get damaged. Now, if like me, you just twisted the bulb out rather than disconnecting the connector because it was a little easier, it's a good idea to put these back in so we don't damage them while we're working on it. So press in on the release tab and slide the bulb out. You can then slide it back into your fascia behind the fog light and twist it back in place. We'll do that on the other side as well if you removed it that way. We'll now need to get our washer bottle out of the way. There's two bolts that hold it in here at the top. We're going to use a T30 Torx to remove those. We can now remove our washer bottle. You'll have to push a little bit towards the rear and then go up to release it from the bottom. And then you can kick the bottom back towards the front. And we're going to release our hose here. There's a small tab located right here. You can use a flat-bladed screwdriver or a trim panel tool. And we're going to just gently pry that away from the hose. And then slide the hose out. We can then take our washer bottle assembly. You'll have some electrical connectors attached to it as well. Pull that off the back of it here. And then disconnect the connector by pressing on the release tab. You'll have another connector located here at the bottom. Pressing on the release tab right there, and then pull it out. And we can get it out of the way there, just like this. And then we're just going to use a strap to hold it up, because if you take the hose off, you'll have to drain the whole bottle and all that, so we want to avoid that. So we're just going to strap it up there. You can use a bungee cord if that's what you got. We're now on our inner fender liner to the front side of the tire. but towards the inside of the vehicle here, you'll find an opening in your fender liner with tabs located at the bottom as well as at the top. We're going to remove these tabs by popping out the center, and then we can pop out the rest of the tab once the center has been pulled out. We'll then do that for the other tab located above it. We'll then come back up to the front. By our washer bottle here, we're going to remove that Torx bolt there using a T25 Torx socket. We can then lift up on our tubing and slide it out. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. On our driver's side, the tube has the ambient temperature sensor located in it. We'll disconnect the connector and then slide our tube out. Now that we've got it out, it's a little easier to get the sensor out once you've got it off the car. It just pulls out of there. So go ahead and pull that out and plug it back in to the connector. Underneath your headlight, you'll have 2 bolts in the frame that go into our bumper beam. We're going to remove those with an 18mm socket. We'll now prepare our hardware to start installing our brackets. Take the longest bolts that come in your kit, place a lock washer over it, and then put some red Loctite on it. From this point going forward, we're going to be using red Loctite on all of our hardware. You'll want to prepare 2 of these bolts for your driver's side here. We'll now take our side bracket. We're going to feed it in. And it will line up with the holes of the bolts that we just removed. So now that we've got it where we can put it in position, we're going to take the hardware that we prepared and a spacer. The bolt will go through the bracket first, and then a spacer will get placed on it. So we're going to do the same thing for the lower hole also. And now we can lift our bracket up, line up our bolts with our frame, making sure not to pinch any wires behind it. And we're just going to loosely install the bolts for now. We want it to be able to move around to install the rest of our parts. If you want to, you can go ahead and run it down, but you want to make sure that you've got a little bit of play in it. We're then going to repeat the same process on the other side. You do want to keep in mind that your side brackets are specific to the driver or passenger side. This one's for our passenger side, and this plate here that's welded on, it's a little bit smaller in width here than the piece right behind it. That's going to go on the passenger side with that welded on plate sticking towards the outside of the vehicle. Now on each side we'll need to trim out our air deflector. I've gone ahead and marked out the area that we're going to trim out, as our cross brace is going to go in this location, so this is going to be in the way. We're just going to use some tin snips to cut this out. We'll then repeat that on the opposite side. We'll now take our cross brace and we're going to slide it between our 2 side braces that we already put on. And this is going to attach using the shorter bolts that come in your kit. We're going to go through our side brace and into the cross brace. And then on the opposite side, we're going to follow that up with a lock washer and a nut. We're going to repeat that for the lower hole here and the 2 on the opposite side. We're now going to take our tape measure, and I've got some extended out, and I just sat it on the bumper beam. And what we want here below the bumper beam, we want our tape measure to come down about 4 1/8 of an inch from the bottom of our bumper beam. Because we're now going to have to take our cross brace and we're going to lift it up until it touches there to make it nice and square. And then we'll tighten down our side brackets first, where it meets the frame of the vehicle, and then the side brackets where it connects our cross brace to the side brackets. Now it is difficult to hold it at that perfect position and make sure you're lined up with your tape measure, so I recommend you get an extra set of hands to hold it in place and make sure that it stays at that distance from the bumper beam, and then go back and tighten down your hardware with a 19mm socket. Then we can go back and tighten down our side bolts that connect to the cross brace. I recommend tightening the top ones first on each side to hold it in position, and then you can go back and tighten on the lower one, as you're going to have to use hand tools to tighten that one down. For our lower bolts, you're likely going to have to use a wrench to tighten these down due to clearance. You may be able to get a small socket in there going in from this direction, but you don't have very much throw on this side, so it's kind of a give or take on which is easier for you. The foam pad that runs across your bumper beam, we're going to take this off. To remove it, you just kind of want to lift up a little bit on it and then pull forward, and then we'll set it aside. We're now going to take the plate that comes in our kit, and we're going to use this as a template to mark out where we need to drill. So this is going to line up with the holes here in your brace at the bottom. So I think the easiest thing to probably do here to help you do this is to take bolts, slide them through, and then line it up to where it's flat, and then we can mark our holes now to be drilled. So I've gone ahead and made circles, but you could also do lines to mark the center of the holes. So you could do like a little dash here, and then a little dash on the other side, instead of marking the holes. And then you can just draw a straight line across to know where the center plane is. But we went ahead and marked both our holes. We can now drill out the holes that we'd marked using a 1/2-inch drill bit. I recommend that you place a piece of wood or something behind it, so in case your drill bit does go through, you hit the wood and you don't hit into the radiator. So we're just going to put that up there flush against our radiator. If it falls forward, it's okay. We just want to make sure that we don't cause any punctures. And then we'll just drill it out. We'll now prepare our hardware. Take the medium length bolts that come in your kit and place a large washer on them. And don't forget your red Loctite. And then we'll take the plate that we use to line up for our drilling there, and we're going to set that in place and then run these bolts through it. We want the offset here, so see how the holes are closer to this edge? We want that to be the bottom edge. The longer distance we want to be the top. It's going to slide down from the top. It's going to go behind the bumper beam, but in front of our cross tube. The bolts will slide through the holes that we drilled and the plate. And then on the back side, we're going to place a lock washer and a nut. And then the shorter bolts that come in your kit, we're going to run those through and then put lock washers and nuts on the back side of those. We can then go back and tighten them down with a 19mm socket and wrench. We can then go back and torque all of our hardware to the specifications found in our instructions. We can now install the cover plates. This is going to cover up the hole where our tube was. So this is going to actually go on the opposite side. So slide it in there from the other side, and you can see it here. Line up the holes. You'll see that they are offset, so it's a little bit towards one side. You'll notice that the holes here for your opening are also offset, so just make sure you line those up. Then take the small bolts, place a flat washer on it. That's going to slide through the fender liner and also through the plate. And then we'll place the lock nut on the opposite side. We're going to do the same thing for the lower hole. We'll then tighten down our hardware using an 11mm socket and wrench. And then we'll repeat that on the other side as well. We can now put the foam pad back on, but it's going to stick out because of these bolts here. The instructions want you to mark and trim this out, but if we trim it completely in half, the pieces aren't going to want to stay up. So it recommends that you just cut out a section here in the back, but without proper tools, that's a pretty difficult cut to make, and even if you do have like a good saw or something. So what I found to be a little bit easier here, and it's going to look cleaner in the end, is just go ahead and set your foam up there, and then mark where your bolts are, and then we're just going to use a large drill bit. I'm going to use a step bit, and I'm just going to run it straight through, so we'll have some holes here for our bolts to pass through. So I was having difficulties getting the whole step bit all the way through, so we drilled the pilot holes from where we started, and then here on the back, we're just going to widen that out for our bolts. After you've got it cut out, test fit it and make sure that it fits flush. Looks like we're nice and flush with the top there, so our foam is right up against the metal. Don't forget to reinstall your washer bottle before putting your fender back on. I also recommend that if you're doing a complete flat toe setup on your Mini here, that you leave the fascia off until you've installed the rest of your components, because having that off is going to make it easier to route your wiring for your braking system and your diodes. So this is a great opportunity to get all of that done and save yourself some time. We can now reinstall our fascia in reverse order of how we removed it. With our fascia back in place, we're ready to connect to the back of our motorhome and test everything out. And that completes our installation of Roadmaster's Direct Connect baseplate kit on your 2016 Mini Cooper S.